Hey, left, right, out. Let me adjust this real quick. Okay, so we've seen a rip roar in the markets last couple of days. Another one today, this morning, opens up 600 points. Of course, it's coming back a little bit. I mean, we're at 400 points in the Dow, 30, 39, 40 in the S&P. Just absolute craziness. What is happening, in my opinion, like I said, I gave some theories in my last video, which I haven't done a video in a few days, which I wanted to, but I just got things going on. But we saw there, I gave some theories, and some of them, they're not mutually exclusive theories. They could be overlaying each other, and that's kind of seeing that a little bit. You have a lot of short covering that was sparked, and it continued this morning. If I've seen some articles talking about these pretty much the influx of buying as well. So I don't know what people are thinking. I would not touch this with it. I wouldn't touch it with your money at this point. Just because you start seeing on the other side of the issue, it's like, why are you buying? Everything is set up for a flushing of downward. Everything is set up at least for, continued downward pressure, whether that be a retraction in some of the earnings. Of course, you had the banks come out, B of A comes out. And what you do notice, and I guess I'll go into this instead of saying, let's go. The overarching theme is most companies' earnings are contracting. And they're already at high PE levels, even at S&P 3600 or whatever it is. And couple that with monetary policy, couple that with interest rates, couple that with looking at the bond market, couple that with geopolitical factors. But I was going to say the B of A and there's another bank, maybe it's JP, they're all going to come out with good earnings. And one of the reasons are above expectations, more than likely. I mean, what kind of expectations we're talking about, I don't really know. But if you look at what their big seller or whatever, their main source of revenue or cash flow, it's interest income, which some of them did well on trading bonds. I guess B of A did, but their what do you call it? Their business investment, or they're bringing people to market and all that, that's down significantly. But if we look at their interest income, which is pretty much, they can just buy, or they can just set cash at the Fed right now and make 3.25%. I mean, why do anything? So just sitting there, and you've seen some articles about the Fed actually paying somewhere upwards like $500 million a day or something like that. It was something crazy. I don't even pay attention anymore to a lot of that, but I just know that it can make a lot of money. It's just the principle that mattered. You don't have to do much with it. You can just sit there. You make 3.25%. Why not? And it's pretty much risk free. And to a sense, if you take out other inflationary pressures, then it's risk free. But still, losing money in the sense that it's below the CPI rate year over year. But in another sense, they're not losing money elsewhere, like playing in the markets or trying to trade this, on a daily basis, which typically those banks are. A bank is just a money making factory. That's what it is. So, like, markets are down, they're not making money there. They make money because the interest rates are up or whatever the case. There's all sorts of ways to make money. I used to say, like, you go, what is it? You can give a man a gun, you can rob a bank. Give a man a bank, you can rob the world, or something like that. It's crazy. So what we did see today in the last, since one of the, I was bringing these theories up, and while we're seeing this rip roar in the market all of a sudden, we've seen a decoupling too, where prior, like I could say, I guess, bear market rallies in this bear market that we've been in, you've seen when they rallied, you've seen other assets that follow with it, and that being gold and gold stocks, because it's more, there's also an anticipation of inflation. But today and the last time, we've seen a decoupling of oil in particular, that's one, and gold stocks. Because I was actually, I was telling you I was buying this one gold company, and when we'd pop up like that, it's like, well, I guess I better sell and make a couple bucks, and then I'll just get in a low. And I was doing that, and this time around, it's not popping as much. And you see gold kind of flat, you see oil flat, but you still see the 10-year hovering around that 4%. I mean, there's all kinds of disconnects that we haven't seen yet. So my analysis of this, and what I'm saying is, there's a psychology that is changing in the market now. This pivot, anticipation, these type of characters, that psychology is evolving into a new paradigm, and this happens throughout the market. So, like I said, we always talk about the capitulation moment, and like pretty much everybody's on one side of one thing, and there's a panic, whether that be to the buy side, which you've seen, or that be to the negative side, which we haven't seen in a long time. But anyway, that's my quick 5-minute analysis of the market, because I wanted to get into something else that I really wanted to do a video of before, but I haven't. As you know, that my channel, well, if this is on the YouTube side of things, has been struck or has a warning against it, medical misinformation, which wasn't misinformation. Turns out I was right the whole time. And I haven't put a lot of things on here. But anyway, I still got that on there. If you go to Rumble, you can find it a little easier. Some of the stuff that I've talked about when it comes to the sweet sour sniffles. Well, recently, and I don't know if you get struck over this, but I'm just saying anyway, like, if you pay attention to the media outside the States, you get a lot more information. Let's just be totally honest. We are under a propaganda regime. Out there, especially in the EU, granted, we can criticize the EU on a lot of things. Typically, when it comes to the medical side of things, when it comes to like injecting certain things in kids or doing certain things, they're usually a little bit better. They're less corrupt. That's the way it's been over the years. I don't know. It's constantly evolving. Anyway, there was it's been interesting to watch these governments over there try to call Pfizer executives to various questionings, and some of them have just not shown up. And then finally we get one that's like head of international whatever marketing or something like that. She admits that they never tested the sweet and sour sniffles serum on for transmission. Pretty much a big scheme. One, you have a whistleblower too that's currently in the States that's testifying to some of these shenanigans going on in the trials. Secondly, you have her admitting this. But you also look at the defense of what's going on in the States, how the Pfizers of the world they're trying to defend themselves. It's all precarious. Basically, it was a big money grab, and you guys were all duped. And some of us were telling you this. Some of us were not allowed to post things on Facebook over just logical reasoning and discerning, just irregularities in drawing at least a hypothesis and making people aware. And supposedly that's in the new fastest the science world, that's not allowed anymore. But anyway, look that up. An executive admits they didn't test this for transmission. They're pretty much laying the bag out, but she still, if you listen to the whole thing, she's still justifying herself that she thinks the speed of science or whatever that means. The second thing that I want to talk about, well, this, recently came out. It's been going on. You would think that we'd learn our lesson. So one of the things we got struck on in and pariahed throughout the social media, which this channel on YouTube is nothing. It's got no followers. On Rumble, we got a few, but on Facebook, people, read some stuff I post. It's all taken down. But one of the things we talked about, which I'd followed this sweet and sour sniffle thing since 19. Some of the guys that I listened to and some of the intelligence, we knew about it over there before it came to the States in 2019, when there's first these little inklings of some kind of weird, novel disease. I don't want to say certain things so we don't get struck even more, but anyway, we followed it. We looked at certain data points. There were scientists that were able to get a hold of this to map it genetically. And there were evidences, there were whistleblowers within the CCP that came out. And before that, the sweet and sour sniffles got to the States, there was a bunch of stuff that we were looking at. Once that first little event happened and you start looking around and you're like, oh, well, this lab's there. We start uncovering certain things. Some of the guys I was listening to, which I haven't heard too much about, looking at prior events that are similar to this, other labs that have had little incidents. It's not that uncommon. And we've drawn to that conclusion based off a couple of different... So in 2004, even struck here, I already knew that this was from that place, the factory of, diseases, or the lab for, just, I don't know what terminology you can use on here. But anyway, so we knew that. We weren't allowed to say it. Well, we now kind of at least know that factory of diseases was at least experimenting on similar ailments or pathogens. So we know that they were doing that. and that we funded them. I didn't know at the time that we had the funding mechanism. That came out later, like a few months later. There were some other guys that found that or linked that, and then that was pretty interesting. They're like, well, I didn't know what to think about that at the time. I thought maybe that was some CCP propaganda. Turns out it wasn't. But anyway, going down that rabbit hole some more, we find out recently that one, Peter Daszak, who should probably be in prison, he gets there's like a hair. He gets another grant recently, which you'd think you give this guy one grant that winds up with a shamdemic. You wouldn't want, he'd be a pariah in the scientific community. Well, no, let's give him another grant. Secondly, apparently Boston University is over here in the States, nonetheless, by the same nefarious characters that put the other couple of grants forward, have merged we'll call it the wild strain and various elements of that and the spike protein of the Omicron variant, and have conjured up a virus that has at least an 80% kill rate on mice, which is not, granted their immune systems are set up, as best they can to mimic human immune systems, as far as I can tell on this one. Of course, this hasn't been completely peer reviewed, but it doesn't mean it's just because it hasn't been peer reviewed doesn't mean the data is irrelevant. So we can look at it. It seems pretty nefarious because you're combining some of the aspects of one variant with some of the deadly capabilities of another, which one of the aspects of that one variant is its I want to say permeability, but it's just its ability to infect and replicate significantly greater than the wild type. But then you have the deadliness of the wild type, which you put them together, you can just surmise what can possibly happen. But they were doing this, and granted, there's not a straight equivalency to mice. There's other extraneous variables that are not controlled there, but you can extrapolate that is a pretty nefarious thing to be doing. And the fact that we're building up, I want to call it a chimeric virus, but you're just using the same one, but using different elements of it. It's the same virus in a sense, but different variants, but just splicing different, genetic components of this to make the more virulent and deadly strain. It's pretty crazy, in my opinion. Why are we doing it here? Secondly, on that regard, one, it's like, why didn't we learn our lesson? Why are we doing it so soon after this? And why are we doing it with this thing that causes pandemic? I don't know. I can understand scientific knowledge and kind of understanding certain things, but it just seems out of place. I guess secondly or thirdly, with the knowledge that we have that there's so many of these leaks, there's a bunch of them. You can just, of course you can't Google anything anymore and pull up any real results. But if you actually do a little deep dive, there's guys that have put lists of all the leaks that have happened over the number of years, and it's pretty crazy. And to think that you have one at Boston University and a possible leak of that, who knows what would happen, because it'd probably fly under the radar for a little bit, since there are variants that are going around, and people aren't necessarily as vigilant looking for different variants. So you might catch it later, but it might be too late. It might be spun by the media a certain way. But anyway, knowing all this, it's either we need to do some really hard looks at the procedures and whatnot we have in these laboratories. But you can do a deep dive and look into the past and see it's pretty prevalent, these leaks. And they're inadvertent. It's just people, when you're in any kind of facility, or if you're in the military, you understand this. If you do certain things, there's what they call complacency. You get complacent, and you don't necessarily you got procedures, whatnot, but you just go through the motions a lot of times. And sometimes when you do that, things happen. Like if you've ever been in, guys that listen to this are in combat, you can attest to this. It's usually the most dangerous time in any kind of patrol or whatnot is on the way home. People are complacent. Or when you're at the end of a deployment, people get complacent with doing the same thing over and over again. And it becomes, where their heads are not on the swivel anymore. This type of stuff happens. And it happens even more so. You think somebody in the military discipline's been driven into them for whatever X amount of years, as opposed to somebody working in a lab who's just, they're scientists, they're given a certain amount of respect. And you think over and over again, eventually, maybe they cut a corner here and there. And you find vials of smallpox in some kind of apartment building. Has happened before in a leak. So anyway, just something to think about. I don't know where else I was going with that, but it just baffles me, some of this stuff that has been going on. So I would look, and it's hard to find stuff in our media about with this Pfizer deal, but I would look at it, that vax transmission stuff, and also that the lawsuit that's going on in the States with the whistleblower there. And granted, there's some nefarious things that are going on with her where she couldn't even come public because the way the government was working on this investigation. And I want to get into that. A good guy to look at it for that is Robert Barnes, because he's representing this particular individual. What else? Ukraine. Oh, okay. If you're this far, I guess I'll give you a little Ukraine-Russia thing. So, like I've called the end of the war before, and I believed it was. They had the borders, all they had to solidify. They annexed, like I predicted, like I said, everything happened. And it was more like border solidification and just like getting things back to normal. Well, now we have when you predict these things and when you say things, somebody else always has a vote. So Ukraine, attacks the Crimean Bridge, which then sets off a series of events for Russia to retaliate, because now that's Russian territory. So now the war is ramping up. So now the war's back on. In fact, it might even be more on than ever, because now we're having deep strikes into Ukrainian territory by the Russians. I already call it retaliatory attacks for that, but in the media, it's, Putin's some kind of Hitler-esque type person, which I don't believe. For a minute, he's not crazy. He pretty much, probably way saner than our own president. But anyway, so he's hitting him, and supposedly with Iranian drones, which, I've been critical of a lot of the Western reporting, because it's propaganda, but they're probably right on this. The Iranian kamikaze drones, whatever you want to call them, suicide drones, because personally have knowledge of them, or at least the separatists in the Donbass region, utilizing some Iranian technology. Because if we don't remember, Iran and Russia are fairly tight allies, or they have been in the past, sharing various technologies and whatnot. And that capability is usually in the realm of IEDs. So the Iranians would give them their like infrared type technology. So like some of the IEDs that were actually being placed by the separatists there, which at the time, I guess I was, since I was training Ukrainians or more involved in that, I kind of looked at, them as the enemy. But having a greater understanding now and understanding the history of the thing, I viewed it a little differently. But anyway, one of the tactics they use this infrared thing. They place it in like a stop signs or whatnot, and they also have I can't remember. Like if you're of that, if you were in Iraq especially, you would understand that there was a couple various IED technologies, and one of them was Iranian. I believe it was like a plasma. I can't remember exactly what it was. It's been so long since I've been involved in understanding this, but it was basically a very sophisticated and IED system, and the Iranians were the ones that were able to develop that kind of technology, and where it was utilized in Iraq, and then it was seen in the Donbass region in 15, and beyond. So the fact that Iran might be helping Russia with certain drone technologies, which if you want to get back into that, who gave the Iranians the drone technology that they currently have? Well, it was reverse engineered, more than likely, at least a lot of it, from the drone that the Obama administration mysteriously let fly over there. That's a whole, if you don't remember that, look into that. That's craziness. And that was one of our most sophisticated drones. I can't remember the nomenclature of it, but anyway, never got that back. So you bet your bottom dollar that a lot of the technology they have when it comes to these drones, whether they be just various drones in their arsenal, have that kind of technology, reverse engineered. What else do we want to get into on that? Everything is developing so fast. I guess I've got to end this from 20. We'll just end it on this note. When I get on here, I start going down one rabbit hole and there's another one, because there's so many stories. It's not like it used to be where there's just a couple stories going around. There are so many things, like if the world, not to bring up markets, but it was just the world itself is a bubble. there's never been so many pins ready to pop this thing and set something really off. But anyway, I'll talk to you later. Peace.